Okay, good morning to all this morning here in Australia, and welcome to all of those who are in Brazil. My name is Cleuto Seraphim. I am the president of the Australia-Brazil Business Council. And before I start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, and we pay our respects to the elders past, present, and future. The Australian-Brazil Business Council is a not-for-profit organization engaged in promoting and strengthening our trade relations between Australia and Brazil. Today is a very special day as we realize the last webinar of this series of the online events of the B.Talks in celebration to the 75th anniversary of the diplomatic relations between Australia and Brazil. And before we proceed, I would like to mention a few housekeepings. Please now keep your microphone mute in case that you need to speak or to ask a question. You can use the chat or you can raise your hand, and we will be able to allow you to speak. And before we continue, I would like to also say that you can chat with your other people on the chat function of this meeting. If you know someone that is in the meeting that you would like to talk, you can privately, send them some information or chat with them. But please remember that if you do it in public, everybody will actually see your conversation. I would like to disclose as well that we have a very limited time for question and answer, but we'll do our best to address all the questions. This event is also being recorded, and it will be available on our YouTube channel next week. So basically, welcome to the Australia-Brazil Business Council series of webinar B.Talks. And as I mentioned, this series of events was created by the Australian-Brazil Business Council, where participants have the opportunity to listen and interact in an insightful talk with experts and authorities in the relevant fields of international trade. Previous editions featured experts in innovation, digital marketing, finance, social media, agribusiness, textile, and fashion industry, Brazil's export and bilateral opportunities after the COVID-19. So you can visit our YouTube channel to access those videos. In 2020, we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the diplomatic relations between Australia and Brazil. And basically, as September is the month of Brazil's independence, this edition of the event is even more special for us. Together with present and former advisors of the Brazilian government, we will delve into the current outlook of Brazil's economy, and we will discuss investment opportunities. I will pass to our board director, Thais Osser, who will introduce the guest speakers and moderate the panel this morning. So Thais, good morning, and thank you for your participation.
Good morning, everyone. I'm honored to be here and to moderate this panel today. I'd like to start by thanking all our very, very special guests. His Excellency Sergio Moreira Lima, the Ambassador of Brazil in Canberra. Paulo Rabello de Castro, a Brazilian economist. And for those of you who've never heard about Paulo Rabello before, he is the former president of the Brazilian Development Bank, BNDES, and the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics, IBGE. We also have Carlos Pio, the Executive Director of CAMEX, the Board of Foreign Trade and Investment of the Brazilian Ministry of the Economy. We also have Cleuto Seraphim, who you guys already met, our president, and Flávia Ribeiro de Souza, our vice president. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of our Consul General of Brazil in Sydney, His Excellency Sergio Bath, and all the diplomatic corps and all consular corps in this meeting, amongst many distinguished guests. And this event wouldn't be possible without our sponsors. So a very big thank you to the Consulate General of Brazil in Sydney, Eyes On and Oceania Legal for making this possible. And also thank you to all our event partners, the Embassy of Brazil in Canberra, Austrade, Laneway Education, IBGE, and LATAM Airlines. And of course, I could not start this event without saying a very, very big thank you to all our members, board directors, and volunteers, because without you, Australian Brazil Business Council wouldn't exist and we wouldn't be able to be together here for this event. So big thank you for everyone who supports the Australian Brazil Business Council. For those, all of you who are new to the council, you don't know who we are, what we do, feel free to reach out to one of our team members during the chat. Carol Diniz is here available to answer any questions you may have. You can ask her any questions about membership or about upcoming events and things in our schedule for guests as well. So without further ado, welcome everyone, and let's get started with our first guest, our first very special guest, the Ambassador of Brazil in Canberra, His Excellency Sergio Moreira Lima. Ambassador, what is the importance of the 75th anniversary of Brazil in the Australia relations?
Good morning, Thais. Good morning, all my friends in Brazil and here in Australia. Thank you very much for this, the organization of this important series of lectures, which will be concluding today. As Gleuto has mentioned, is a very special opportunity as it coincides with the National Day of Brazil. Brazil and Australia established diplomatic relations in 1945. It was a natural decision for countries that were allies in the Great War and also in the Second World War. They signed in that same year as founding members the Charter of the United Nations. Both countries were participants in a defining moment of world history. And later, they contributed to important issues such as decolonization, to promote development, and to consolidate and expand a rules-based international order. Brazil and Australia have played an active role in drafting major instruments of international law, such as the Convention of the Law of the Sea, and the strengthening of the multilateral trading system within the WTO. Their commitment to shared values led the two countries to join efforts to achieve common goals and to promote international cooperation. Brazil and Australia are the two largest countries in the Southern Hemisphere. They have both very large and important biomes. And they have become the 9th and the 14th largest economies in the world. They are today members of the G20. Nowadays, they are responsible for food security, as well as for providing minerals and materials for the industry of the 21st century. They are also important multicultural societies and representative democracies with a regional and global impact. During these 75 years of diplomatic relationship, Thais, they have managed not only to overcome the stigma of geographical distance, but also to establish a strategic partnership. This partnership means that we have to have high-level political contacts, frequent exchanges, and more trade and investment. The challenge for Australian and Brazilian entrepreneurs is to implement it for the mutual benefit of our countries, taking into account the interest, values, and aspirations of our societies. Last year, 27,000 Brazilians came to study in Australia, making Brazil the 4th largest contributor of foreign students to this country. People-to-people links have grown considerably. Brazilian community in Australia have reached 50,000 people. The same trend can be observed with the presence of over 80 Australian companies in Brazil and of a growing number of Brazilian companies in Australia. With a large economy, very competitive in agribusiness, mining, and in the industrial sector, especially in electrical engines, and we have here WEG and airplane manufacturer, Embraer, for instance, Brazil is in a position to contribute to Australia's prosperity. On the other hand, by expanding our relations with Australia, Brazil can benefit thoroughly from the most dynamic region on the world, where the presence of Brazilian business is becoming more conspicuous.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador, for those inspiring words. And it's so interesting that we've been, you talk about the history and our combined history and how we've been side by side in so many important world events and momentous events, and how we have overcome the geographical distance and became stronger partners as the 75 years of our relationships have passed. So very, very interesting. And I also find it very important to mention that all of the international students and all of the Brazilian and Australian businesses that have been working together to strengthen for the mutual benefit of both countries. So thank you very much for sharing your words. I will be moving along to our second guest speaker, Paulo Rabello de Castro. Is a Brazilian economist, former president of the Brazilian Development Bank, BNDES, also former president of the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics, IBGE. So Paulo, let's start looking at the economy. And I think that everyone is anxious to answer a critical question about the economy. What do you think the impact of the pandemic will be on the Brazilian economy now and 2021 onwards?
Okay, Thais. Good morning to our Australian friends. Good evening to our Brazilian colleagues. I wish to congratulate the Business Council on this initiative. I'm very happy to participate. But I hope next time we can participate live in person and not only as a through the internet. Well, I would like to address your question very objectively by showing you a chart which I just prepared with yesterday's information on the second quarter GDP performance of Brazil, which shows a minus 9.7, which compares to, I think, yesterday's data, which was released for Australia. A comparable -7. And as you may see, together with the US and Germany, we can say that we have endured pretty well the blow, which for us is basically contained on the second quarter. Unlike China, which came into the pandemic first and was already partially out of the woods in the second quarter. So it shows a plus 11.5. I think this chart shows something which for me is very interesting. I mean, those who happen to be prepared to be commodity exporters, significant commodity exporters like Australia, the US, and Brazil, all supplying China, they have, not surprisingly, been ahead of others who have not fared so well, especially other countries in Latin America and of course in Europe. They're lagging behind. That doesn't show that everything is paved on our way towards recovery, but I am on the optimistic side. I am on the optimistic side because I think that for the year, Brazil will probably be be showing a -5 to -6 drop in GDP, which is far better than the -8, -9, or even worse for other, especially European and Latin American countries. For next year, 2021, this is this is the big question mark for the Brazilian economy, because we have spent quite a bit to weather the effects of the pandemic on our general demand. So we have been hit very dramatically on the fiscal side. Our internal debt has increased quite sizably. So from now on, the 2021 budget will have to show restraint. We have a very responsible federal government, so I think that our fiscal laws will be honored, and of course this will include a toll to be paid in terms of our next year's performance, which will be positive, but only around a +3%. Looking further on, I would say that Brazil is very unequal in its growth prospectus. We see extremely good performances going ahead in terms of cattle raising, in terms of the grain production. So the ag sector is doing superbly. I'm going to address this second chart that's being shown later on, if I may, on my second answer. But I would say that my big preoccupation is regarding the industrial performance. That requires that we pass a significant tax reform that Australia, fortunately, you don't have that problem. But this is the crucial economic reform that we have to show ourselves being able to produce, and that will be extremely important also regarding the attraction of external investment. And so unequal growth prospectus is something that the external investor in Brazil should keep in mind. You see, you have to pinpoint not only the sector, but the region in Brazil, which, like Australia, is a continent that you're addressing your investment, because you may be as warm as in the oven or as cold as in the fridge. And the average Brazilian growth is just an average. We have to caution ourselves that are extremely interesting opportunities if you can select and pick the right sectors, the right subsectors, the right partners, and the right regions to be in Brazil.
Excellent, Paulo. Thank you so much for that optimistic view and to bring some data into the conversation. I guess we've been watching so much news and a lot of negative news in the media coming from Brazil. And it's interesting that we start talking with numbers and with actual facts. I think that brings a lot to the conversation. And with that in mind, I'll move along to our next guest speaker. Carlos Pio is the Executive Director of CAMEX, Board of Foreign and Trade Investments of the Ministry of the Economy. So Carlos, as the President of, as the Executive Director of CAMEX, responsible for the formulation and coordination of the Brazilian trade policy, how do you think Brazil could expand the trade relations with Australia? You are on mute, Carlos. Sorry.
Thank you, Thais, and thank you everyone for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I lived in Australia for 3 years, from 2012 to 2014, and became a great admirer of the country, its people, and the way and the way government and businesses interact. I'm a very good friend of the Ambassador Sergio Moreira Lima, who I met here already as a government official in 2018. And it's a pleasure to see how Australia-Brazil relations are in such good hands. Well, I think that we can split the answer to your question in two sides. One is what governments can do, government officials, both in bilateral relations and in international fora. And also all the opportunities that I think that was at the end of Paulo Rabello's speech, that he opened up this second way of seeing our relations and the prospects for the future, which has to do with the business decisions, both in relation to trade, export and import, but also in investment. And you have to be, we have to be very clear that one thing is the averages, one thing is the way the media portrays general ideas about both countries, and the other thing is what are the prospects and what are the forecasts for specific sectors and specific investments and specific industries in Brazil and in Australia. In terms of the potential for government cooperation, I think they are huge. Even if this is not a particularly good moment in the world economy, and particularly in the realm of trade, we have difficulties to get the WTO into full motion. But there is huge potential for our governments to explore in terms of how to facilitate trade and investments. And we have to be very pragmatic and understand the difficulties that the private sector has faced in recent years, and what successful experience can tell us in terms of ways to pursue. I'm not particularly sure what there is in the table of our foreign affairs ministries and secretaries in terms of the prospects for agreements. The ambassador has talked positively about the prospects of our cooperation in general, but I'm sure, because of the momentum that we have given by the tax reform prospects in Brazil, that we can build a big bridge of cooperation in tax terms, and maybe it could lead to a double taxation agreement. Australia has been a big partner to Brazil's bid to accession to the OECD, something that I was involved directly after I came back from Australia. And I think that one of the major accomplishments of our negotiation with the OECD will be a simplification, a push for simplification of our tax regimes, particularly in the way we tax multinational corporations. And I think that will increase the opportunities and the incentives for businesses to invest in both countries. In terms of the private opportunities for investment and trade, I think that they are huge, and I think we should, I was an academic for most of my life, and I had a very critical line on the way the Brazilian state and Brazilian government usually addressed economic policies and trade policies in particular in a much more liberal leaning that is hand in hand with the one that Paulo Rabello espouses. So I'm a great admirer of the kinds of policies that he has advocated throughout his life. And I think that in that vein, it is important to say for the business community, listen carefully to what government officials are saying, but find your own way to make money. And there are huge opportunities in complementarity between the Australian economy and the Brazilian economy, including in the same industries. So there are huge opportunities to learn from each other and to complement and to invest across the board. So even if we compete in agribusiness, for example, in mining, there are huge opportunities for mining investment and agribusiness investment in both ways. And that's my initial take on your question.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Carlos. It's very interesting to know that the timing of everything is kind of coming into play as well, with the momentum of the tax reform and the increased cooperation between countries. I think we're looking at a few different opportunities coming along. So it's very exciting to hear your opinion in what you've just shared with us. So thank you. Now moving back to the ambassador. Ambassador, in the same line of the trade between Australia and Brazil, how do you see the prospects of enhancing the trade between our two countries?
Can you hear me? Yes. I fully agree with the Pio and also Paulo Rabello. The prospects for increasing both trade and investments are excellent. First of all, the size of the economies is in itself an encouragement. Bilateral trades in goods and services does not reflect the dimension of both countries' GDP. I should stress that Australia has also one of the highest household income in the world. So the prospects for increasing are enormous, taking into account the economies themselves. Secondly, the Indo-Pacific has become the world's most dynamic region. It is important for Brazil to continue to raise its profile here by exploring the enormous potential for our economic relation with this region. Partnerships can contribute to increase productivity and enhance competitiveness. But I should also remind you that Brazil is still seen, as was observed, I think, by Carlos Pio, in Australia as a competitor. Both countries export mineral commodities. Paulo mentioned also this. They have strong agribusiness and are large animal protein producers. Yet, I see opportunities for complementarities the same way as they do, and partnerships. As is in the case of Brazil's growing participation, for instance, JBS in the meat production and processing in Australia, creating jobs and developing expertise, and enhancing this country's export capacity. JBS exports to over 6 countries from here and employs thousands of people in Australia. Just to give you an example, Australia intends to make its agriculture production totally digital integrated, from understanding genetics to transport logistics. Cyro, which is the big CNPQ here in Embrapa, they signed an agreement, and they are able to explore how to joint efforts in this regard and increase mutual benefits. The demand for fresh and processed foods and ingredients in Asian markets will double in the next 2 decades. And this offers significant opportunities for both countries' agribusiness sector. Brazil and Australia partnership can enhance our capabilities in food engineering and science, digital manufacturing, and supply chain innovation. Academic and business cooperation, and we have shown you that there's 27,000 Brazilians coming here. It can enhance access to food science and engineering skills, innovation, and new product development. Digital sensing and data analytics can optimize supply chain and manufacturing performance. Two other important challenges in food production are sustainability and waste management. In all these areas, there are enormous complementarities for innovative solutions and mutual gains. Brazil is the largest market for Australia in Latin America and the main destination for Australian investments in the region. The same applies to Brazil in relation to Australia and Oceania. But we can do much more to increase Brazil's presence in the Indo-Pacific and Australia's profile in Latin America. As Brazil and Australia develop closer links, and this is the purpose of our meeting today, we will be able to enhance mutual awareness and knowledge, and bilateral trade and investments will tend to expand and diversify.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And I think it's interesting that you've mentioned, and I know that when we talk about Brazil and Australia trade, there's a lot of conversation around mining and agriculture. But one thing caught my attention is the exchange of knowledge and innovation. So not only in the spaces of mining and agriculture, but also in the knowledge and innovation when the push to sustainability. I think our countries can definitely start working closer together in these spaces. So thank you for sharing that in your talk. So as I move along, thank you so much, Ambassador. Let's go back to Paulo Rabello. And Paulo, inspired by the answers of the Ambassador, I would also like to know your opinion about these two important sectors, agriculture and mining, because there's a lot of talk about agriculture and mining, but I'd like to understand from your point of view, how can we enhance the collaboration in these sectors between Brazil and Australia?
I think that Sergio, our ambassador, has been extremely fortunate in his latest answer. I think he said it all, but I am just going to reinforce the fact that if we truly believe that the 21st century is a knowledge and innovation century, then this is the playing field for a playing field and a meeting place for Brazilian and Australian entrepreneurs. Let's trade knowledge, let's share and exchange knowledge, let's share and also develop research towards innovation. And of course, I think that Australia has several heads in front of Brazil in terms of their technological performance, including in mining. Maybe not so much in terms of the ag part, because in that one, as the ambassador has mentioned, Embrapa and a few other world-class research centers in Brazil have done this wonderful job of creating what I would call a tropicultural miracle, which is our Brazilian agriculture. Is a tropiculture because there has been an incredible degree of technological adaptation so that we can also, including new seed varieties, a whole host of them. So if you place, Thais, our second chart, you're going to see that this miracle has been going on since the outset of Embrapa, this national Agricultural and Cattle Research Center, which has started in the early 70s in Brazil. Of course, as any research investment, it takes at least a decade or two. So you see that the green line, which is the production grain, the production line, which is colored green, and also the yield line, which is colored yellow, they detach themselves from the blue line, which goes steady around the 100 index right until the turn of the century, which means that right until the turn of the century, basically what Brazil did in terms of upholding its agricultural grain expansion, because I'm just addressing grain, but you can also mimic those indicators for cattle, for poultry, and for pork. Just to quote a few meats, you're going to see that this mouth, this crocodile mouth, is opening up, you see, and do 100% to increasing yields. And that goes on until today, you see, and we're heading towards 300 million tons per year of grain production with hardly any contribution. It's about a 77%, if I'm just quoting by heart, but a 77% area contribution, as opposed to a 206% yield contribution during this broadly half century to produce a bigger than 400% result. Of course, other than photosynthesis, entrepreneurial talent, governmental support, and not so much infrastructure, we are lacking that. So if brave Australian entrepreneurs are willing to join our infrastructure, address our infrastructure needs, including railroads in the center west of Brazil, that will be very much welcome. And I would say that this miracle has been worked out not only because of the special conditions under which this agricultural and cattle raising production worked out, and this reasoning goes for mining too. This was because agriculture managed politically to shield itself from the high interest rates and the abusive tax rates that produced a demolition of part of our industrial sector meanwhile. So that teaches us a lesson. They were practicing not subsidies as much as normal interest rates and a normal tax rate in the agricultural sector. And that was enough. And basically zero export taxation, which is also very important for agriculture. So when you add all of this, this is an incredible hint for the future reforms in Brazil. If we mimic what we have been doing for agriculture, which is not subsidizing, but paving the way towards normal economic life, this miracle can be worked out also in industry and in commerce and services. So Brazil has a lot to do if we are bold enough to stop babbling about our future road and really engaging ourselves in approving those reforms in Congress as fast as possible.
Paulo, what an inspiration. Thank you so much. What was that word that you used, tropiculture?
tropiculture, which is agriculture applied to the tropics. Because actually, when the first soybean seeds came inside the pockets of some of my friends, including a notorious and legendary Chinese person, who then also became a very important industrialist in the south of Brazil, those original seeds were not adapted. So it took a long way before Embrapa could adapt not only to our agricultural conditions, especially the application of modern technology in the Cerrado area, which is the big savanna plateau, the bioma in the middle of Brazil. And when that occurred, which is basically direct planting, we were able to work out that miracle.
Excellent. I love the way you have addressed it, and especially using as an example for growth for all of the other sectors in the country. And I think very important for those of you here who are Australians interested in Brazil as an investment opportunity. I think Paulo Rabello here just highlighted a few different things, a few different areas that we definitely are welcoming and needing more support. But and just look at the size of the country, look at the size, the scope of what we're looking in terms of size, in that equivalent to, in terms of opportunity. So
if you may just let me add in a second, I mean, fruit production in the northeast of Brazil, wine production in the south of Brazil, to which the Australians are excel, and they might want to collaborate and to invest, maybe to co-invest with Brazilian vineyards. So I'm just quoting by heart. And in the mining sector, much more. I think that we have hardly tapped mining opportunities in the pre-Amazonic rim area. Metals in general, gold in particular, diamonds, all of that is still to be tapped by future investments, which have to be, needless to say, in a sustainable fashion, because, as I said, this is a must, and Brazil has to acquire its certificate, its worldwide certificate again, which we have just lost. And I want to be very candid, and the ambassador will allow me, you see, because of our diplomatic foolishness.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Paulo. And I'll move on to Carlos. And I think very much in line with the conversation that we've been having, Carlos, in understanding how currently our trade with Australia works. It's been characterized by Brazilian exporting of manufactured goods and importing commodities such as coal. In your opinion, what do we need to do to make this bilateral trade a little bit more dynamic and diverse?
I think that Brazil has a lot of homework to do, and I think in the past 3 to 4 years we have finally decided to start doing them. The Brazilian economy is undergoing in this period that I've mentioned a lot of deregulation and fiscal consolidation, and I think that this is an important and essential homework. I think that we will be pushed into that direction even further with the process of accession to the OECD, and I think that that we have an alignment, an ideological and political alignment right now that really drives us into that direction, It is across the aisle in political terms, and I'm very positive about the prospects of that. Of course, the current circumstances are not the best ones for any country, any government in the world. But at the very least, I have to say that we've here stick to a basic understanding that our state is too large where it shouldn't be, and it is too small where it should be. And I think that the areas that were mentioned here by Paulo and the ambassador are really important. We have to have a much more knowledge into science and technology, and it has to be done in a way that is through international cooperation and following the most prestigious institutions that we have, not only in Australia, but also everywhere in the world. And I think that we have some important organizations in the science and technology industry here that have a lot to benefit and also a lot to cooperate. I think that tax reform that I mentioned before, privatization and the selling of government stakes in different companies is also going to create major opportunities for foreign investment in Brazil. Brazil already attracts a great proportion of the global FDI, and it is prone to attracting even more. We've been recipients of large investments from developed and developing nations, particularly China, and I think there is clearly opportunity for Australian companies to come here. There are lots of possibilities coming out of the simplification of tax and the simplification of labor laws that is underway. And definitely, I think that the environment that comes out of these reforms is one that is conducive to not only bilateral trade, but trade in general. I think that the Brazilian government looks at the Australian experience in the 80s and 90s as something of a benchmark. And more we look into the possibilities of creating a productivity commission, just like the Australians have done, and unilateral trade liberalization as something that we should be pursuing. And Brazil is prone into that direction. I think that the structural simplicity of the Australian federation is something that we cannot replicate. So it creates we have lots of difficulties emerging from the fact that instead of 6 units of government in subnational government, we have 27. Same area, 8 times more population. Huge differences in social and educational levels. That is also challenging. That opens up huge needs for reform and improving government records in all levels of administration. We have 5,600 municipalities, and so the needs are huge. The opportunities are in tandem, and they have to be approach with a long-term prospect. There are lots of opportunity for infrastructure investment in Brazil, and as I said before, cooperation in areas where we compete. I mean, if Ford, or if Audi and Volkswagen can compete and cooperate, Brazil and Australia private sectors can do the same in mining, in energy, in infrastructure, in agribusiness in general. And I think that this is for our societies and our companies to explore. In our side, and summing up what I said, I think that there is a clear understanding that for our own interest, the Brazilian state has to shrink in terms of the way it regulates businesses, and it overtax some areas, and it has to become much more efficient and conducive to us overcoming lots of our social, economic, and market fragilities.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Carlos. Professor Carlos, may I say? Carlos was a professor here in Sydney before, and I was just thinking it would have been a joy to be your student through that time. Thank you so much for sharing your insight. And I think that the tax reform and the changes there are coming are definitely going to make for a more optimistic trade relation in especially where there's competition, there's always also can be collaboration. So a highlight there for me. Now let's go back to the ambassador. Just keeping just a quick note to all the speakers. I haven't been interrupting you because the wealth of knowledge has been so great. I never want to interrupt the flow of knowledge, but we are running out of time. So we are going to go over time. So for those of you who are here with us today, we will see this conversation through, but just be mindful with your next answers. So just to summarize the answers, I would love to spend the whole morning here, don't get me wrong. And if I could, I'm sure everyone else would also be joining me on that one, but just mindful of our audience's time and need to potentially get back to work. So Ambassador, let's talk about Embraer, because just recently, Allianz Aviation just announced a purchase of 14 Embraer commercial jets. Since your arrival in Australia, you have put a lot of effort in enhancing the Embraer presence in the country. What does this represent? What does this type of trade represent to the future of our bilateral trade?
Yeah. Thank you, Thais. I think that Embraer is an example of what Professor Pio has just mentioned. And under the present circumstance of the pandemic, this is an important deal for the continuous development of Embraer in Australia. As you know, Alliance, which is a air transportation company in Queensland, is a leading provider of charter flight service in Australia. And Embraer, as we all know, is the third largest commercial airplanes manufacturer in the world. So I was proud to celebrate last year's Embraer 40th anniversary in Australia with demonstration flights over Brisbane and the Gold Coast, and a visit to Sydney, to Sydney and Sergio. As executives from Alliance were present at that flight. They are familiar with the quality of Embraer planes. So the decision taken by Alliance will reinforce its traditional partnership with the Brazilian company. They had before Bandeirantes. It represents an innovative response to the market, showing that despite the challenges of the pandemic, one can find opportunities for investment, promoting economic growth and employment for Australia and for Brazil. The purchase includes a significant package of equipment, tooling and training devices and engines, an option to acquire 5 other E-190 aircraft, also a full flight simulator and related training equipment, which is very important because then you can start the training of Embraer pilots here in Australia. So this is an investment for the future. The Embraer planes will join Alliance's existing larger fleet of Fokker planes, the Dutch manufacturer. In the long run, Embraer will be better positioned to compete to increase its market share. The pandemic represents an enormous challenge for the aviation sector, as we all know, with many airlines not flying and the increased demand for 100-seat narrow-body aircraft in the Australian market. The Alliance decision was really considered smart and innovative. And this was the result of common planning between Embraer and also Alliance. And with the reduced passengers on mainline routes due to COVID-19, the E-190, the Embraer plane, has the potential to be the perfect aircraft type for some mainline routes. I have been pointing out that Embraer could make a difference in the Australian market, bringing the best from Brazil and the world. Expertise, added value products, science and technology. During the air show in Avalon last year, Embraer was also present with its executive jets, and it showed some of it. And I hope that 2021 will also bring to Australia the C390 Millennium for a demonstration flight in Australian skies, as new opportunities are pursued for further expanding the presence of Embraer products and services in Australia. The C390, as you all know, is a multi-purpose cargo plane developed by Brazilian Air Force and Embraer together. And it replaces the old Hercules planes. It is being used both as a military plane as well as to combat forest fires. And it went just last week or some weeks ago to take loads and loads of cargo to Lebanon, to help Lebanon to overcome the problems that they had there. Former President Temer was also present, but we had 2 Embraer planes in that mission, and this is very positive. Thank you. Thanks.
Excellent. It's so interesting to see the size and scope of Embraer. And for those of you who are not as familiar with Embraer, understand the variety and diversity of opportunities, and how interesting it is that there is investment in aviation, even through this pandemic, through the coronavirus. There's still this innovative response to the pandemic. So thank you, Ambassador, for sharing your thoughts. So now, I would like to pass the word to someone else. I'd like to invite the Vice President in Oceania Legal Principal, Flavia, to proceed with the questions. So one question for Mr. Paulo and another question for Mr. Carlos. So Flavia, would you please join us and please take over the questions?
Sure. Thank you, Thais. It's a true honor to have you, Paulo and Carlos, here with us. I'm going to try to be very brief with the questions. Paulo, with your experience as a former president of BNDES, which advice would you give to Brazilian and Australian businessmen and investors on the current and future opportunities in the Brazilian market? And in your answer, if you could expand a bit more what you said before about the sectors and the regions. And also, do you think it's valid for us to add the biofuel sector to our tropiculture?
Yes, Flavia, for sure, biofuels is an important subsector of this applied Brazilian technology, which we would call tropiculture. ethanol, but also the application of ethanol from corn and from other grain is extremely important, and we are moving fast in terms of technological improvement. I would like to stress again, with you have mentioned my experience as at the National Development Bank, which is a public federal bank, an important bank in Brazil. We have in Brazil at least 6 different biomes. So Brazil is not the same agricultural-wise. We have several different mining provinces. We have a huge, which has not been mentioned before, a huge natural gas sector, which has just about yesterday begun to be deregulated. So it's an important, absolutely greenfield natural gas in market in Brazil. And also the hydro electric plants, which also have an upside, a continuous upside in Brazil for especially for small-sized dams. And so the infrastructure side is just about huge. We interested parties could apply, and I see here our specialist in the Sydney Council to bridge their questions towards the National Development Bank through the Sydney economic sector. So that would pave the way of Australian investors, and they should not hesitate, because the National Development Bank is there to answer those questions, other than Apex and other specialized parties. And also, I would also emphasize again, Flavia, that we're dealing with different Brazils. The Northeast is the complete different set, full of opportunities. Just to mention one, tourism, with all its thousands of miles of mind-boggling beaches, and with hardly any security problems. So it's a greenfield also. If we go to the north of Brazil, inside the Amazonic basin, we have specific logistics opportunities, which are incredibly important, together with natural gas again, and together with mining. And if we go back to come to the Cerrado, I have already mentioned grain, cattle raising, but I also want to mention coffee. We didn't have time to talk about our flagship, historical and even today, and also cotton, which is something which is very keen to the Australian entrepreneurs too. And if we come to the urban side, services side, all the logistics, all of the supply chain technologies, we're talking about big cities like Sao Paulo, Rio, Belo Horizonte, the cities in the south of Brazil. And so I'm going to just eat up all the remaining time to mention, as I said, different regions and different subsectors which have to be mined, so to speak.
Amazing.
With
Thank you so much.
Of the Brazilian embassy there. And I think, since I have a lifelong relationship and friendship with Sergio, we have known we have been together even before we have known our wives. So we have been together for a long time. So through friendship, I can dare say that relating to the Brazil-Australia relationships, I think that we should come out of this shyness, you see. We should set ourselves goals, quantitative export-import goals, and we should tick one by one all of the restraints, all of the barriers, all of the obstacles, and make people work. We need to emphasize speed as much as as we are talking here. We should turn these words into action. And I think it's going to be a very fruitful action. We are too shy. I hope, well, in part because we seem to be so far away, but this live talk has just shown how close, in fact, we are. You see, I just don't abdicate from my rights to go in there personally to enjoy your superb wines.
You're more than welcome to come and do so, Paulo. It's been a huge pleasure and amazing contribution. Thank you so much. I think that we have a lot of material now for more of these webinars in the future, just about what the things you just said to us now. Thank you so much. Now, I'd like to ask a question to Carlos. So, Carlos, do you think that in order to establish a level playing field with other big economies, Mercosur and Australia should negotiate a free trade agreement? And do you think that is desirable and necessary? And if so, what measures should be taken by the government and the private sector to make this happen? And just the last limb here, in the absence of these agreements, what can businesses of both countries do to integrate themselves in these markets?
Thank you very much, Flavia. And I've seen there is a question in the chat box from Philip Livingston, an investor that would like to bring technology to Brazil and faces high tariffs. Philip, and I think that they are related, your questions. I would like to address both. Philip says he faces 100% duties on imports of machines, of technology. And you know, this is something that is partly in my portfolio. And I've been fighting for unilateral trade liberalization in capital goods and IT goods. You know, it didn't give me much friends in Brazil, and also among my colleagues in the government. And I'd like to be straight into saying what I think and the difficulties that we face being here. But first, Philip, let me tell you that it's not 100%. It's a very high tariff of 14%, but it's not 100. It still makes us very uncompetitive to companies, to attract companies such as yours to come here and not only provide services for the Brazilian internal market, but also to use Brazil as a platform for services, you know, high value added services exported to our neighbors and maybe to the rest of the world. And I completely understand the difficulties that these tariffs pose. They make no sense for what, if we consider what the rest of the world has learned with the technology revolution. And I'm not only mentioning Internet of Things, something that you've mentioned in your question, but also the sheer increasing productivity for the whole industrial sector, which is not still in the Brazilian industry. Just to give you a sense, the average age of the machine equipment in the Brazilian industry is 19 years old. So it's completely deteriorated. But as a country that has pursued import substitution policies through protectionism for so many decades, I think we are close to the 80 years of protectionism. We've grown lots of interest groups that could only survive with that protection being maintained, and that's a political struggle. I was in the previous government when we made that proposal of reducing unilaterally the tariffs on capital goods and IT goods, and here we are doing for the first time the signing of plurilateral agreements in the WTO that will allow for the import of technology goods duty-free. It's small steps, particularly in regard to what we need to foster industrial competitiveness through a global chain participation, and we need more voices such as yours to play into our political system, to let more people in the Brazilian government and the Brazilian Congress to understand that for technology sector to really grow in our economy, and to the renovation, the renewal of the productivity and competitiveness of our industrial sector, we need to open up, not only through agreements, as Flavia was asking, but unilaterally too. Brazil has done so in the 1990s, was a huge success, but because it spent so much time without reducing tariffs by itself, they are high again. We didn't move, the rest of the world has moved to even lower tariffs, and now all the agreements have to do with standards and not tariffs. We are the only ones offering tariffs. Our agreement with the EU has included tariffs because Mercosur is one of the few areas where tariffs are still very high. But that's a problem more than a solution, because our partners want to dig deeper into agreements that go into standards. And so we have to move much faster than we have been moving. And again, this is part of the growing understanding that I was referring to before. And again, something that may come out as a new development out of the negotiations that we should be starting with the OECD for accession. I think that I don't want to put all my coins in the same bag, but I think that the accession of OECD is the single most important development in fostering reform since the debt crisis of the 1980s. I think that this is a big push in the right direction, and differently from what we faced in the 80s. This comes with lots of positive inducements that we didn't see before. So just to simplify, we have to go through agreements and we have to go alone in reducing not only tariffs, but non-tariff barriers that impede our society from benefiting from cheaper imports, not only of high technology capital goods and IT goods, but also all the commodities that we need to import. Paulo Rabello was mentioning coffee, and coffee is something that we haven't been allowed to import, and this is necessary to have a good blend that will add value to our product.
That's fantastic. It looks like, Carlos, that simplification is a big word for us now.
Yes.
Thank you so very much for your invaluable insights and contribution. I'm going to now pass the word on to Thais. And here we go, Thais.
Excellent. Thank you, Flavia, and thank you, Carlos. Unfortunately, I have to be the person who needs to end this conversation, because I do think that this is such an important conversation, valid conversation, and to start the dialogue. I think starting the dialogue of collaboration and what is the way moving forward. We know that there's a few challenges along our way, but we do know that there's a lot of people committed to opening the doors and really strengthening this relationship. So on behalf of the Australian Brazil Business Council, I want to thank everyone who's here today, our guest speakers, for your generous contribution and the amazing work that you have been doing in helping develop the Brazilian economy and also the bilateral relationship with our countries. Also, a very big thank you for everyone who's here. But before I go, I do want to hand over to Gleuto. So Gleuto Serafim could give us his last few words for today, because this is our last B.Talks in celebration of the 75th anniversary. So please, Gleuto.
It is. Well, thank you, guys. Thank you very much for this fantastic talk. I would, as Thais said, I would stay here all morning talking about this, but I have to say to Paulo, Rabello, and Carlos a big thank you. And I have to say that I have actually made lots of notes in here, and you've given us a lot of ammunition for us to fight for some better results for us as entrepreneurs dealing with Brazil and Australia. And it has been a great pleasure. This is going to continue to be a discussion point in the Australian Brazil Business Council. We will have other talks in relation to this. We are today closing the 75th anniversary series that we were doing, but we will continue to have more talks. So I invite those who actually would like to be notified about our next conversations in here, that they please join the Australian Brazil Business Council as a member, and that will actually help us to facilitate that conversation with all the different entrepreneurs. I would like to say thank you. Just to close down this meeting this morning, I would like to say thank you, and I could not forget that the Consulate General of Brazil in Sydney has been a fantastic help. Sergio Bath, Joaquim Pena, the second team lead with Margarete and Carla over there. Thank you for this huge contribution you have given and participation. And I also would like to say a great thanks to the embassy in Canberra. Ambassador Sergio Moreira Lima has been fantastic supporter and I would say an inspiring influence to all entrepreneurs in here to do more and to dedicate more. I want to thank you as our guests, our people who are listening to us. I remember talking to Joaquim Pena, and we have so much on our list of things that we would like to continue to discuss, and we will continue to do that. So finally, I would like to thank Thais for your fantastic job, the girls that actually work with us, and Flavia, the Vice President of the Council, and behind the scenes for all these things to happen. We have a very important person, Carol. No, she's not even on the video here, but Carol has made all this happen. And I would like to thank you, Carol, for your tireless work that you have been doing behind. Carol is our one of our board members in in Canberra, and she basically drives all our events. If this was a face-to-face event, we would have this huge venue full of flowers and food and everything, but we're doing it virtually here. So thank you, Carol, for your efforts and everything else. So thank you all. Thank you very much, everybody. This has been recorded. We will actually document these. We'll be talking about that, and we'll create several materials coming out of this. Okay, thank you. Thais.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Glilta said everything, but before I go, we do know that there are a few questions that were unanswered. We will take note of them, and we will send you a response to them with our next communication. Again, guys, everything will be recorded on YouTube. And if you don't know who we are, the Australian Brazil Business Council, our doors are opened. And if you do need help, information, knowledge more about the trade between Brazil and Australia, please reach out. Before I go, I would like to say a big thank you again, Ambassador Paulo and Carlos, for sharing so much knowledge with us. This was an extremely valuable experience for me personally, and I'm sure for everyone here on the call today. I'd like to thank all our supporters as well, and especially for all of you who came and spent some time with us this morning. I know that our time is very valuable, and we really appreciate your time. So thank you for sharing your morning with us. And with that, I would like to close off today. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and for everyone who shared their knowledge and their questions and their work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye.
very much. It was amazing.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.